an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Immortal Great Souls, Book 2, The Rascor Plains. I always want to say the Rascal Plains. Chapters 18 through 21. In these chapters, y'all, we get a Praximar interlude. It is not enlightening. Unfortunately, not really. A little, but like in a way that we sort of already knew. So I was hoping that we would get a big peek into like a dark secret. Not yet, unfortunately. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. Dan is here in the chat with me as usual. Appreciate you, like, almost always being able to come to these, Dan. It's very helpful. These chapters were, like, again, the quickness with which the plot is moving keeps on surprising me. And that is a good thing. You know, there's, like, really... I've started to sort of realize that a lot of what I read in my personal time, as many of you know, are kind of cozy mysteries, which, whether I give a shit about it or not, often have like a kind of romantic element to them. And they're so tropey, you know, and like to a degree, that's what we're here for when you read something like this. But I think that there are times where I forget that the slowness of the pacing with certain things of that nature is like a byproduct of a story being kind of formulaic in a lot of ways. So whenever I come across something that doesn't take as long to get to the point, I have to stop and be like, oh, because this writer is trying, like, it feels very explicitly to subvert tropes. And it starts off making us feel like we're getting a quest. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to set you up so that you think that's exactly what we're doing. And that's all we're doing. And then I'm going to surprise you. And that's going to be handled very quickly. And I really appreciate it, especially in light of how worried I was at the fact that, you know, we already had heard how the White Queen was planning on leaving. It just felt like I was facing this sort of dread at watching our friends struggle across the plains when they don't actually know that when they get to the end, she may or may not be there. And that adds a certain amount of tension, which is fine. But there's, like I said, the dread aspect there was something that I was like, this is less fun than what I'm hoping for. And I so appreciate that he didn't make me kind of sit through all of them being heartbroken or disappointed or whatever. Although there are times where that can be done in a way that works as well, where you are set up so that, oh, when we get there, we'll deal with so-and-so. And then what if they're not there? Now we need a new plan. How are we going to handle all this? So all that to say, the fact that not only do we have our friends reach the fiery shoals as quickly as they do, but we also have them like just walk through back to a room where they are meeting everybody in Bastion with very little ceremony, right? It's just like this, she opens a door and we just go. We are only at chapter 21, reminder of how many chapters are there in this book altogether. We have got 69. Nice. Yeah, so we're like a quarter of the way through just about, and already shit's been dealt with. I just wasn't expecting it. When I say shit's been dealt with, clearly, asterisk, right? Like, It's not been dealt with. We have a lot more shit to deal with. There is so much going on, and there are so many moving parts, and there are so many like people and places coming into play that we have kind of heard their names before or heard of the locations before, but they haven't really meant anything to us. And I'm in that weird stage where I'm not sure what I need to remember and what I don't. And it's sort of frustrating because I think I don't really need to remember anything. I think when we reach a point where something is relevant, the author will have a character repeat the thing and remind us. However, there are times where a little mention of something that is sort of, what's the word I want? Almost like casual, like you're not meant to pay attention. It will turn out later to be something that's quite significant and like becomes a big piece of the puzzle. So I really want to keep track of everything just for the puzzle's sake. And I can't do that. I know I can't. And it's not really a great use of my time. I should just let this story wash over me and not try to figure it out, quote unquote, because that's the fun, you know? So, anyway, I just wanted to address all of that. So, let's start with chapter 18. This is really interesting. So, Leonis and Scorio are wandering around the fiery shoals and they don't see a whole lot. It says the layout of the fortress was confusing. And like the hallways are identical. A lot of the chambers are empty. There's no signage, it seems like. And it turns out that a lot of the workers here, it says they were caravanned out to the shoals for month-long stints to keep the fortress operating. Of the thousands of residents, more than half were this transient population of cleaners, cooks, laundresses, chambermaids, entertainers, sentries, and more. I think it's very interesting that we have got such a high population of normies in the mix. I don't know what that's going to mean, but I feel like it's going to be something. That's just a lot more than I was thinking. Over half? Like, wow. Then we have a quarter of great souls. Mostly they were house affiliated and kept company with their own kind. And they attempt to chat with them and nobody is interested. It's unclear exactly how much it gets like overtly shut down and how much of it is just them kind of being non-committal in their responses. Like, I don't know if people are actually sort of rude about it or more or what, but so they eventually go outside and they're looking around at the place, which is like, it's a smell of sulfur and fire everywhere, and it's just not super inviting. And Scorio gets a glimpse of this incredible ship. Twice the size of the others and infinitely more luxurious. The whale's airite bones were inlaid with silver and gold, while the deck was made of a uniformly pale white wood that blended with the bones. The aftercastle was 2 stories tall, its sides perforated by rows of square windows with a grand steering wheel dominating its top behind the railing. Endless ranks of sails rose up the lengths of the 3 masts, easily a score of them ranging in size from the vast mainsails to the miniature topgallants. Countless thick ropes affixed the ship to its own dock, which was again twice the size of the others, and an entire phalanx of guards stood at attention upon the causeway, looking relaxed but eminently competent. And they try and figure out whose this is, and eventually they hail, I don't know if we would call him a sailor exactly. Maybe he's somebody who works the dock specifically. But they ask him whose ship it is, and he says, well, ultimately it belongs to the Iron Tyrant. And I just want to give the narrator again some real props here, because the voice that he uses for this man It is remarkable how I can lose track of the fact that it is one person doing all of these different voices. But this dude, the way he does this, well, I suppose it ultimately belongs to the Iron Tyrant, don't it? Out in the fiery spires, but it's run by the Celestial Consortium with the White Queen on this end overseeing and loading, and I guess the other consortium members on the receiving and unloading and distributing the mana as it comes out of the crucible deep beneath the shoals. And you know about the crucible. And he has this like sort of tone to him and a weird pause, but not exactly a full pause, that has a bit of sound still in it that gives the suggestion that this man is like thinking between sentences, trying to like keep himself in the moment and focused on the conversation, so that later on, when he begins to lose track of the convo, you're not that surprised, because you've had the sense the whole time that his mind wants to wander away and he's like pulling it back. It's just really remarkable. This guy, like, I felt like I knew his deal immediately just from this voice, you know? Um, so yeah, it's gold mana as it comes out of the crucible deep beneath the shoals. The crucible, I can't pretend to understand it, but as far as I know, it's what's used to channel the gold mana when the fiery shoals was but a young island. And the provenance of the fiery shoals is someone tampered with the gold that flowed up to keep the island floating, and it all went to the 10 hells. And the whole island just crashed into the plains and tore its way all the way here, disrupting the land, causing devastation. The crucible, it's what drew the gold mana up from the ground, and it didn't break. It's still down there doing its thing, drawing up gold from the depths. It's what keeps all of this bubbling and smoking. Elsewise, it'd have all hardened into stone, wouldn't it? Stands to reason. But no, the crucible draws up that gold, and well, they waited for a second, and then Scorio moved his face into the man's line of sight. And, oh, apologies. Lost my train of thought there. The gold gets drawn up and harvested, and then shipped deeper into hell. It's precious stuff, gold mana. So, I'm extremely confused. And it's sort of a weird thing. So, we've got the crucible that's sucking gold mana up, like channeling it, right? Is the word that he uses. So somebody fucked with the gold already flowing upward, and that caused the island to crash and create the plains. But once the gold is all the way up, you can just pack it and ship it, and that's fine. So basically, if you do anything to the pipeline before it comes out of the spigot, you are messing with something that could cause a complete catastrophe. But if you just turn the spigot and take it off that end, that is not a problem. And that is the area that is guarded so carefully. I find it really weird that it's still working after the island crashed. And also, like, I just don't know if I buy it. This whole story feels, I think it's just, I don't really know like a lot of the mechanics of anything, but that's sort of the problem, right? Is that nobody really seems to understand the mechanics of anything. Like the crucible, he doesn't know how to explain it, and one could say that it's because he's not a great soul, but the great souls have also kind of said, this is shit that like we can't recreate. So how do we know that's exactly how the fiery shoals happened? Are there like tons of journals out there of people who were witnesses? Or was this another thing that sort of happened so far back in the mists of history that we're just going off of the like word of a couple people who weren't witnesses but who have like tried to put a story together? It just feels like we are setting our regular people up to think that taking something is dangerous and calamitous just as a means of like stopping them from doing it because we want it all and not necessarily for the reasons we are being given. Um so it's just sort of a I don't know, there's just something, and you guys, like, the gold mana being siphoned up. Where is that all coming from? Because I can't help but feel a bit of a way about the fact that Bastion is slowly being eaten away by hell and turning into a smoking ruin. But there's gold mana being harvested out of the ground here. And there's like, I have like a suspicion this is at the expense of the people of Bastion somehow. And I guess what I'm saying is that are are they taking all of the gold mana out of Bastion, and that is part of why hell seems to be encroaching the way that it is? Like, is that I just don't believe this. It feels too it feels like too convenient to just be able to say, oh, you can't touch that stuff because bad things will happen, when we know how covetous the great souls are about gold mana. Why wouldn't I believe that they have just made up a little fairy tale, to keep people away from it and to justify having the kinds of guards on it that they have? There's just it all just feels shady to me. There's just not enough explanation about how this is getting siphoned, why it's supporting the islands the way it is, like how the islands evidently weren't always here then, right? Like the islands have been created by the same people who created the crucibles. And I'm assuming each island has its own crucible, right? Um, because like that's sort of I I was looking at this as if it were a naturally occurring phenomenon, but if it's that gold mana, then it would have to be from what they have made, the machinery of the crucibles. So I don't know, guys, this is all just feeling weird to me. Dan says the Iron Tyrant is such a great name. Yes. There is somebody in another series that it was Will White's The Engineer, or the first one, the captain. And there's a character named Steel Avalanche in that. And Iron Tyrant was like really the two of them. I'm sort of listening to the other one with Owen, and I was like, why is this feeling familiar? And then I was like, oh, it's Steel Avalanche that I'm thinking of. But yeah, Iron Tyrant I'm going to be very interested to meet that character. So they take a closer look. There's clearly a lot of people who are on alert, looking at Scorio and Leonis poking around. And they finally get a little closer and they run into this man. An older man, thumbs tucked into his belt, stood confidently before it, clad in the same black uniform as the pair by the gate. His sash was crimson edged in white, and he watched Scorio and Leonis approach with a slight smile. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said as they drew close. "Afternoon," said Leonis jovially. "Excuse us, but we're newly arrived and out exploring. Is it all right if we're here?" "As long as you don't try to get past me," said the older man. He was old for a great soul, perhaps in his early 40s, his hair salt and peppered, his broad mustache impressive, his face florid. I'd have to kill you then, said Scorio, trying to laugh. Well, good thing we're not. May we ask what you're guarding? Oh, this? Just the entrance to the crucible, you know? Just the source of the fiery shoal's wealth and social standing. Ah, said Scorio. For all the man's jocular tone, there was something perilous about him, as if at any moment he could snap and tear off one of their arms. I see. The name's Braun, Dreadblaze and Constable of the Fiery Shoals. It's been my honor to guard the golden cupola for a decade now. Nobody's ever gotten past me. I mean to keep it that way. So they walk away, and Leonis is like, is that guy crazy? I got a vibe that man is not okay. It was really intense, that conversation. I wasn't expecting this. And Scorio says something here that I found really fascinating, which is, can't blame him. Can you imagine spending a decade guarding the access point to all that gold and never getting a chance to enjoy some? That's why you think he's crazy, Scorio? It's just, I think, a real look into his overall mindset and how the concept of being denied something that others have such easy access to still lingers with him, even after everything. It never even entered my mind that this man wasn't getting a chance to enjoy any. I actually assumed that probably he gets a little taste for the job that he does, but I don't know that. I just sort of leapt to that conclusion. And the whole, like, the way that eventually, after the conversation that they have with that man who was working on the dock, I think it's Scorio who says it's a good thing Leonci wasn't here, or he would have just chewed that man's ear off. And I was sort of thinking to myself, I wish Leonci had been here, because she might have asked some better questions about certain things that would have pointed out a bit of inconsistency, potentially. But yeah, so the White Queen is ready to hear your case. We get Leonci coming up to summon them. And then chapter 19 is out in the council chamber. And Scorio is given the opportunity to speak. And he, I think, does a pretty decent job. And he presents the case and, you know, lets them all know the fact that he was living on the streets, and so he knows whereof he speaks. And he's like, I understand life is hard for everybody, but everything has been like getting worse and worse, and they are expected to do the same shit they've always done. It's unreasonable. There's nowhere for them to live, and they're not allowed in certain areas, which is like bullshit. The territory is shrinking. You need to adjust to that. The taxes can't possibly be the same when there's less work. And the overall, like, one of the main things is they have been tolerating all of this because they trusted that you guys were handling shit. And then that prophecy came and went, and it apparently failed, wasn't true, I don't know. And you didn't even address that. So now they're kind of feeling like they're being fucking scammed. And there's this guy, Amity. The good people of Bastion will never understand the losses we sustained with the failure of the prophecy. It's really difficult for me to understand how they can say losses with any, like, with a straight face, because all of these people reincarnate, and the regular folks out there do not. So even your losses aren't really the same, are they? You know? And granted, you reincarnate without your memories and stuff, but it doesn't matter. Like, fundamentally, it's not over. And let's see, Scorio says, their overlords demand more than ever. Oh, come on. Overlords? And I was like, yeah, overlords. Why do you think that's an inappropriate thing to call you guys? You're the ones running the show and demanding tribute from them. Yeah. And since when is the loss of 3 imperators in battle a failure to uphold our end of the bargain? Well, the prophecy didn't work. So whoever you lost, that's part of your failure. And Scorio doesn't directly argue with this guy, which I think was actually a smart move. Normally, I kind of want characters to engage with a point, but I recognize that here, this is kind of a distraction. And so Scorio is just like, whatever you say, it doesn't change the fact that they feel like you've got them fucked up and are demanding the same shit, and they are about to lose their minds. And so you can argue with me all you want. They feel how they feel, and they're about to do what they're about to do. So you're going to have to cope with that. Whether you enjoy hearing from me or not, this is the reality. And of course, this dude is like, we have another person. Let's see. Oh, right. So Moira eventually chimes in to support Scorio, but as we find out, it's for sort of inverted reasons. Uh, let's see. Yellow-robed great robe as he rose to his feet. It says great robe. I think it might have been supposed to say great soul. Yellow-robed great soul. But it says yellow-robed great robe. And I kind of like to think that this was on purpose as a way of mentally disrespecting this man in Scorio's mind. But this is a different dude. I wish that the well-being of these people were our primary concern, but frankly, it's not. We have to focus on fighting, and that means wresting every resource to our advantage. This is a waste of our time. If the people of Bastion need to be reminded as to their role in this war, then the Sunhearts are more than willing to travel to Bastion to instruct them. And I wanted to be like, what do you mean, bud? But he didn't, like, Moira pretty much assumes, oh yeah, you're going to go there to get violent. And normally that just kind of flares things up even worse. A lot of the time, these rebellions, you sort of let them burn themselves out and nothing really comes of them. I just don't really feel like that is the case here. And she's like, look, the Council of Autocrators has taken a patient and understanding approach to the outbreak of civil unrest. The unrest appears to be graver than past moments of turmoil. Tombspark Scorio has voiced serious causes for concern, and while his solutions are facile, and I was just like, oh, really? Fair, but also, come on. There may be merit in examining them further. Certain wards could be open to new residents. Taxation rates could be studied and modulated. I sincerely doubt autocrators would welcome a new full member to the council, but perhaps a middle ground could be reached, such as a non-voting member. And later on, when Moira is sharing all of this and it was very interesting to me, she's sharing all of this mentally with Praximar. And Praximar isn't getting what she's doing. She's the one that has the brains about handling this and has to be like, you are not seeing the big picture, dude. All of this stuff we can promise and it makes us look amazing. And then we just bog it down or let them get bogged down in figuring out who they're going to elect to be on the council, in figuring out how they're going to, do a census to figure out new taxes. All of this takes time and it will look like we're accomplishing something and we're not, but that's the point, just to buy ourselves time, which unfortunately is a very familiar tactic that I think we all are aware of. So Amity says, we've a nominal presence on the council and spend most of our time in the deeper echelons of hell. Still, Bastion is the foundation for all our efforts. Each crop of new students represents not just rejuvenation, but a chance at a great hero being reborn. House Chimera is thus, as always, in favor of whatever measures allow us to remain focused on what matters. We're fine with whatever brings back peace and allows us to place our full focus on the pit. And I just thought it was interesting because, like, later on, there's a mention of how once Bastion's gone, we won't be able to resurrect anymore. And I hadn't even thought of that. I don't know what I thought, but I believe that I had this sort of idea that the spire existed, like that there were different points for it. And that was one of the points in Bastion. And the most used one, because they had decided this was the location. And there's just, I don't know, y'all. I feel like I thought this because of the fact that they were able to relocate the spire to the new location of the academy, and that there is still some shit that's like apparently low-key working in the ruins where the academy used to be. And so that made me think that there's potentially multiple locations. Like, I don't know that that one is working the way that it's meant to, but I think that's where I got this concept. And so it's extra wild to me that they are so willing to, like, act as if the people of Bastion don't matter, because if they want to fuck your lives up, they can just ruin any chance of using that spire for what's the, I keep wanting to say regeneration, and I guess that is it. Resurrection isn't really the same thing, is it? Because that's like the body coming back to life, and it's a new body, so I guess it's regen. But they could potentially, like, I don't know how, but I feel like really fuck your lives up. I don't know, maybe they can't. Maybe they can't because, they're going to be facing so many high-powered people. So maybe the thought is, yeah, I'd like to see them try. But I don't know if you've got enough people. I'm not really sure if there's a way for them to break through that difficulty somehow. So anyway, at this point, we have the announcement that Nova makes about leaving the Fiery Shoals. And everybody is like, I had thought that this was something that had been shared, but evidently not. And everybody is trying to, like, keep their faces a little impassive, but it's clear this is super bad news, and all of them just have no idea what's going to happen now. And also, the fact that she's trying to say, like, I think this is actually going to be good for you, and that one day you'll look back on my having left as the time when everything, like, began to improve, that I don't really know if she even believes that. The way that she was talking, I can't remember her friend's name. Is that Desiree? She's got a friend that I believe she basically said, it sucks, but I'm going to have to abandon Bastion. And it sounded to me like she was quite aware what she was doing was sealing the fate of a lot of people. So now she's trying to sort of reframe it as if, actually, you guys will do better without me. And I'm like, you know that's not true. And everybody here has to know that you know that's not true. But she just says it, and that's that. So this is when we go to the interlude with Praximar. And he's enjoying a cup of tea as he is looking down on the weekly reports from the teachers about how the students are doing. And this is so interesting. Cinder Regal wasn't living up to the standards of his past lives. Praximar reviewed his own note to have the potency of the Cinder's morning pills increased. The man had made Crimson Earl once for Etera's sake. It was preposterous that he should be in the bottom quarter of the class. Whereas Emberling Quavo was clearly enjoying a run of absurd luck. The man had never once risen beyond Dreadblaze. It was criminal to waste fat crickets on him. Another note indicated that his treasures should be greatly diluted. So I thought this was interesting because I was sort of expecting Praximar's thoughts. And it may be that this is sort of toned down because we're in his head and we can't, like, the author doesn't want to give too much away. But I was expecting him to sort of be like, oh, this guy's my buddy. He and I used to work together and I like him, so I'm going to help him out. You know, something like much more personal and smacking more of nepotism. But instead, it's based on their previous lives and what they accomplished. And there's something about this that is so upsetting because it's like, you get new lives so that you can allegedly try again, but you're being taught by people who know your past and what you accomplished and ensure that you can only reach the point that you had reached the last time you were alive. Like, Quavo is apparently quite talented, and he had only gotten to Dreadblaze, and it's considered that, well, that's all he can do, instead of giving him the opportunity to try past that. And why is it that he is so certain he knows how somebody is going to turn out? Like, the fact that somebody is actively doing poorly and he attributes that to, like, oh, he isn't getting enough help. But somebody else is doing really well. And he's like, well, obviously that's just luck. It's infuriating to read and insulting deeply. And, like, the idea, oh, well, he only ever made it to Dreadblaze. Like, well, maybe because every time he has reincarnated, you've done this sort of shady shit, perhaps, you know? Maybe Crimson Earl was reached by somebody who had a ton of advantages early on. But it's like it doesn't even occur to him. And then it finishes with a nudge here, some encouragement there, and all would proceed as it should. And that was the part that really made me stop and go, okay, so I'm not getting specific, like, I know this guy or I'm going to need this dude. But overall, that feels like what is happening in that one little sentence. I think. I could be reading too much into it, but I don't think I am. So this is when he's, like, looking at the what do you call it? Record for Imperator Moravius the Black. And he was only reborn 78 times, and he died in the year 623 and hasn't regenerated since then. And Praximar is evidently kind of wondering what the fuck is taking this guy so long. And he says, why do you wait within the Archspire? Do you not care for our fate? This guy apparently was like a big fucking deal. And I just wondered, based on how infrequently Scorio has regenerated, if perhaps he has started to get wise to some things, and that's why he is holding back as well. If this is a similar deal. Then Branzina the Cruel. The last light, the cold, the vengeful, the breaker of fiends, the wielder of the sun scythe, the final mercy, the last recourse. Highest rank attained, Imperator. How he loved that little redundancy, an otherwise useful field throughout the Tome of Souls, but here in the Imperator section so utterly needless, yet filled with pride. Number of rebirths, 83. Last recorded death disappeared in the year 651, while exploring what later came to be known as the Sordid Hive, though no remains, nor most notably the Sun Scythe, were ever found. So that's her deal. And like his death, let's see, a battle that lasted 3 days and nights, pressing its attack, blah, 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 witnessed by Bakhul the Piper and Ophalon. So that dude, his death was actually witnessed, and hers wasn't. So maybe she is still alive, and this is an assumption on their part. Or maybe she is also waiting to regenerate. But her regeneration's rebirth was also somewhat low. So it just seems like most people, they've got like above 100 at minimum, right? It doesn't that seem like that's sort of what we're running across? It feels like this is the higher ranked you get, I believe, the fewer you have. It seems to be the kind of pattern. Anyway, so this is when he is reached out to by Moira, who, as I have already said, is basically like, here's what's going on and here's why it's fine. And his reaction to the fact that the White Queen is leaving the fiery shoals, I keep wanting to do that, is basically panic and, okay, well, we're going to have to move really quickly. And I don't know what this means. I don't know. It seems to be something to do with the gold mana. And I don't know if there's like some kind of means of siphoning it that it may not have anything to do with gold mana. I don't know. But as soon as he's done talking with her, he writes this note and he sends it out. Send it to Ira, Eira is their name. Ensure the messenger does not know that it comes from me. And it says, he considered the change and violence that this note would set off in the days to come. For a moment, doubt assailed him, but then he grimaced and held the tube out to Varys, who took it, bowed low, and departed. There, it was done. It was all worth it. A gamble, to be sure, but what choice did they have? And I just don't know what to make of this. I can't tell if Praximar is up to something that's outright shady for his own gain, or if he is genuinely under the impression that whatever he's doing is low-key the right thing to do. I don't want to give him that kind of credit, and I don't think I will, but it's possible. So, okay, then chapter 20. This is when we meet the Dreadblaze Simeon. And we find out later that he has the ability to like possess people, basically, which is extremely terrifying. But we won't talk about that right now. This is when they discuss Moira, and it doesn't seem like they are considering that she has already talked to Praximar. It surprises me if they know that this is her ability, that they wouldn't think it had already been told to him. But maybe eventually they will put that together. And eventually, like, we get to the part where Leonis and Scorio have to share that she joined them in the hot pool and be like, but I swear she didn't touch us though. And I think she didn't. But let's see. So Jova is like, I want to know what the fuck happens now that the queen is leaving. Nobody's answering my questions. So let's see. We have the bit about how she can teleport, but that it costs her. Within a band of mana, like back and forth across the plains, tough but doable. From what we've learned, however, she can only manage to hop from one band to the next with great effort. She can't just jump from Bastion to the Silver Unfathom. Silver Unfathom is a wild name. I also have to mention that Evelyn is so patronizing throughout this chapter. I have liked her a lot, but I got so irritated with her. Here she says, "Oh, honey," and then later on, "Oh my God, you're precious," or "Oh, they're so adorable," and it was just grating. And I kind of wanted somebody to just grab her by the hair and be like, "Shut the fuck up already. We get it. You're very worldly. Like, can you please? Jesus Christ." Um, and Simeon eventually gets to the point of, I think that you guys will be a really good match for Manticore because we have formed this independent house to find shit out because things don't make a lot of sense. Something is missing in the stories that we're being told about customs and traditions. And there's still so much we don't know. We can't recreate the machines that exist. Things break or become useless. And why is that? Um, but the more you seek, the more mysteries you'll uncover. Some find this exhilarating, others infuriating, which I kind of felt like was the author giving a little bit of a wink to his audience. Um, so let's see. The White Queen will move quickly to stop everyone scrambling for advantage. She'll demand the autocrators swear heart oaths, promising to maintain the peace. And the real crux is going to be seeing if everybody is upset, because if they are, that means nobody got an unfair advantage. But if there's somebody who isn't upset, and I'm wondering if Praximar is going to give things away a little bit. Apparently, the way that he was talking with Moira, he doesn't have the foresight in some ways to know how to handle himself. And I couldn't help but wonder, is he going to seem so composed that he will give himself away because he isn't worried, because he has something up his sleeve? I don't know. So let's see. For a Crimson Earl to travel from the depths of hell all the way to Bastion to get involved with a political dispute that revolves around gold mana would be ridiculous, or to be fair, an incredibly overt move on their part that would provoke other house-affiliated greats. I don't think they'd bother. And as long as he receives his monthly shipments, he won't do more than grumble about the change. The real challenge will be to put in place a system where no one house has overt control over the fiery shoals. And Naomi comes up with an idea, and he's just sort of waves it off, and he's like, they will figure it out. And it's damn good to meet you all. I don't think anyone's made such a splash in such a short time since Mitoko, and they don't really count. So I'm wondering if the they is for another reason, or if this is a non-binary character, and I wonder why they don't count. Why not? I'm interested in finding out more about them. And basically Simeon is just like, everybody is going to be soups jealous when they realize that you're with us and they didn't even get a chance to pitch to you, and they're going to try and pitch to you anyway. So just be ready for that. But y'all, he says you've been whispered, which is essentially when someone is on a hot streak of improbable fortune. So let's see. Oh yeah, this is the part. He can take control of people, said Davalos dourly. Simeon stared at the other Dreadblaze in annoyance. You know it's not that simple. Am I wrong? Once you assume their appearance and step inside them? Simeon sighed. Well, yes, but there are nuances. Don't worry, it's a defensive power. I use it primarily to neutralize powerful foes peacefully. Added bonus if I can then get everyone else to stand down and cease fighting by issuing commands. I think it's a throwback power to the times when we great souls fought more often against each other. These days, not much occasion for it. Then he just, thanks, Davalos, said Simeon, moving toward the door. And I was wondering if Davalos is just a little bit of a troublemaker. He's like, anytime, buddy, they're joking around, but it doesn't feel like Simeon took it that way. It feels like the sensation is that he got outed, and he is kind of pissed off genuinely, and Davalos is acting as if it's just funny, and I'm sort of, Davalos, I just don't like him, and I think I'm just going to view a lot of what he does with suspicion, because I just am not willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because of that. So let's see. Everybody is asked to gather again, and they are brought to another level of the, what do you call it? The tower, I guess, that they hadn't had access to before. Um, let's see. There was Captain Thorne with a handful of his lieutenants. Manticore stood to one side. Everywhere else were great souls of import to whom he couldn't place names. A white portal appeared on the stage at the hall's end, which disgorged the White Queen and Desiree. I just want to mention that disgorged is gross, and don't use that word ever again, please. The portal disappeared. So, all proceeds as planned. The Iron Tyrant and I have had a fruitful discussion. And she says something eventually about the fact that, like, he was willing to listen to reason, and she gets a little laugh. And I couldn't tell if it was because it was such a given that she was going to be able to convince him that it's just a matter of course, or if the phrasing that she used was sort of like a reference to the way that he tends to speak. I don't know. But let's see. So she opens the portal again, and everybody files through as well. And none of the council are actually here. Evidently, she just wanted to summon them on the spur of the moment, and, as Leonis says, catch them with their pants around their ankles. And, you know, I appreciate this. I think that's the right call, except that we know about Moira's ability. I don't know. Maybe there's just nothing to be done about it. Maybe it's just sort of, you know. So Praximar is the first to arrive, and he's just kind of like unsurprised acting, which is sort of where I'm wondering is he going to fuck up? Because the fact that he is acting unfazed by this when everybody else is startled outright, it feels like the beginning of a poor handling on the situation. So let's see. Then Octavia, let's see. Oh yeah, here she's like, okay, cool. What a rare and unexpected delight. Is everything okay? And they're realizing, like, okay, she definitely didn't know. Roger arrived moments later with 2 attendants of his own. And Ira arrived last. Scoria watched her with interest. The autocrator of House Basilisk was reclusive and hadn't appeared at all during the fight with Imogen. Word was that she'd been absent from the city when the fight had taken place. She is the one that the note was sent to by Praximar. Interesting. She wasn't around when things went wrong with Imogen. Seeing her now, Scorio couldn't restrain his surprise. She was a sylph, her blonde hair cut boyishly short, her eyes alive with an almost feverish light. Freckles spattered across the bridge of her nose, and her smile verged on inappropriate as she stopped before the dais, just shy of a grin, as if this were all a grand jest that only she fully understood. And this really reminded me of the description of, what's his face? Theon Greyjoy in Song of Ice and Fire. That he always has a kind of smirk, like he is in on a joke and the others aren't. And how irritating that is to some people. And I just had an unpleasant, like, I hope she doesn't get reeked. I mean, I don't like her, but let's hope that doesn't happen. So Let's see. Oh, yeah. What a surprise. The White Queen herself winging her way down here to grace us all with her presence. Methinks something big's afoot. Oh, and welcome. Just the vibe. What is it? It's weird, right? It's like, I'm going to be snotty a little bit about how, like, oh, gracing us with your presence. And then welcome, like, at the end, tacked on as if to very much be like, I don't give a fuck that you're here. And methinks something big's afoot. I mean, like, why that phrasing and what are you doing? It just felt very kind of up her own ass, if that makes sense. Um, so this is when she explains the fact that she is going to be leaving and giving up preeminence. And she explains about how things are going to be restructured. Um, our best estimates give us less than 10 years before this tragedy befalls us, the loss of Bastion, and then we shall truly be alone in this war. Each death will be an incalculable loss, and as our numbers dwindle, so will our last hopes of victory. Hell itself seems to be aware of this deadline. Ancient forces rouse themselves from slumber. And this is when we get a lot of what I think is her mentioning things that Praximar had mentioned way back when we were doing the tournament, because he would periodically, like in his speeches, kind of give current events updates. But basically, a lot of people who are bad are stirring or massing power, leaving areas, coming out into new, like, just, it's bad. So she's like, here is how we are doing this. The consortium is going to change the quotas. The bulk shall continue to be shipped via the Celestial Coffer into the Iron Weald, so as to support the Iron Tyrant's endeavors against his foes. However, each house shall now also receive 5% of the total shipment to distribute amongst its members as they see fit, with whichever house holds the rotating position of leadership overseeing the distribution, receiving an additional 5%. A final 5% will be invested by the houses in the improvement and maintenance of Bastion itself. Is that 5% each house? Or a 5% that the houses are meant to use altogether? Because that feels really... all the houses are getting 5%, one person's getting an additional 5%, and then improving Bastion only gets one, like, payment of 5%. It's just, I guess, again, the theory is sort of like, well, we only have 10 years, so who cares ultimately, but I don't know. Consortium leadership will rotate through the houses every 90 Bastion days to ensure no one house is able to accrue too much power or influence. That means each house shall oversee 3 shipments. This endeavor shall be aided by a new system of transparency that will include regular reporting of the amount of gold mana distributed, as well as regular audits of the previous administration to prevent hoarding or monopolization. And they will swear all kinds of oaths. There will be penalties, and they're going to be like, ultimately you can bring things to the Iron Tyrant to mediate if you think some shit's up, but don't do that unless there is no other choice, because he is not going to enjoy dealing with this petty bullshit, basically. And let's see, I'm confident this system will result in the continued prosperity of the plains and Bastion itself. The continued prosperity of a place that has already only a decade on it? Okay. With the help of the houses and the Iron Tyrant, I fully believe that Bastion and the Rascor Plains will not only survive my departure, but grow all the stronger for it. And that is the end of the chapter. And I was genuinely surprised that it ended there, because it felt like there was gonna have to be like some chit chat amongst our people about the restructuring. But No, not yet. So I'm really curious how people are reacting to this. Does this seem fair? It doesn't seem like anybody's angry or upset about it. But also, I'm looking for clues as to what it is Praximar has been, doing whatever he has up his sleeve. So, yeah, you guys, there was just like, again, I'm just really shocked. It seems like she's going to drop off everybody here in Bastion because I don't see why you wouldn't. There's no reason for them to stay at the Fiery Shoals any longer, right? And if we're going to be doing this, like, census about the taxes and electing a representative and all of this, is that going to be stuff that our friends are involved with? Because they're not on any level where they'd need to worry about the distribution of gold mana. I mean, I guess if they get taken in by Manticore, they may have access to some of it. I don't know, though, how much that's going to matter right away. And all I could think, honestly, is that I wouldn't be surprised if folks who were like on the ground wanted to have Scorio represent them as somebody who had lived on the street, basically, who really does know what it's like. But as much as I would understand them wanting to go in that direction and feeling like he's a great soul, so they may take him more seriously than they would one of us, I could also see the fact that he's a great soul making him ultimately untrustworthy to them. So, and all of this is presuming that we're going to get somebody who is elected within this time frame. I don't know if any of that's even going to matter or happen. It looks like it's all been put into motion explicitly because it's not expected to happen, So either things work out better than was anticipated, and we do have some of that develop in this book, or we go completely left and none of that is anything. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't, guys. I feel like I have no idea where the story's going at this point, which I enjoy. I do like that. So, all right, I'm going to wrap this up, but very excited to read more. Thank you, Dan, again for commissioning this. And oh, Dan is saying Praximar is only a Pyre Lord, so he doesn't have his old memories. Thank you for reminding me of that. Genuinely didn't remember. So that does sort of change things. Like, I'm assuming that whatever he's up to is something that's been a long-running conspiracy, but it may not be that at all. Unless it's somebody else moving him around the board, and I'm seeing him as the brains of the operation when he is just one of the hands of someone else, one of some sort of little henchman. And I'll look back at the fact that I thought he was a bad guy and think, oh, that's precious because he was nothing, Anyway, okay. Thank you guys again. And I will be seeing you later this week with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.